Okay, well, hello everyone. My name is Adrienne Nelson. I am the Vice President of Solutions Delivery here at SIA, and I want to welcome you to our webinar, How Automation is Driving a Changed Recruiting Paradigm. You know, automation is no longer an option. Your candidates expect a personalized experience, and the candidate experience is critical to your success. Automation can lead to faster time to hire, more loyalty, and of course, more profitability. So in just a moment, from some of the largest IT, healthcare, and light industrial staffing firms, we will hear about how automation is driving tectonic shifts in recruiting for them. So with that, let's get started. Product overview for SIA. So SIA, as you may or may not know, is the global advisor on contingent work and staffing. We have several conferences for staffing firms and for buyers. We encompass the entire ecosystem. We have editorial products like Staffing Industry Review. I bet a lot of you get our global daily news, and certainly some of you have been through our certification and training. We do have an event coming up, Collaboration in the Gig Economy, and that is in September. If you're interested, just email memberservices@staffingindustry.com. With that, I'd like to introduce our panelists. As you can see, we have a healthy panel of experts here. Larry Dirk, President of Insight Global, why don't you say hello and introduce yourself real quick.
Hey everybody, my name's Larry Dirk. I'm a president with Insight Global. We're the second largest IT staffing player in North America, also with heavy footprints in healthcare staffing as well as accounting, finance, engineering, and just business process staffing as a whole. Been with the company, this is my 13th year now, and I currently oversee our recruiting organization across all verticals.
Beautiful, thank you. And Neil, how are you? Greetings from Cleveland, I guess.
I am in Cleveland, Ohio. So I'm Neil Stallard with the Reserves Network. We're a primarily light industrial staffing company, headquartered here in Cleveland, but we have locations in 12 states and the Midwest, Southeast, South United States. And been in business for 38 years and just plugging along, trying to do our thing.
Thanks, Neil. And of course, my friend and colleague and the sponsor of this webinar, Sets Pankaj Jindal. Pankaj.
Hi, Adrienne. Thanks for having us all here. My name is Pankaj. I'm one of the founders of Sense. Started the company about 7 years ago. But before that, I ran staffing companies for 15 years. So very much come from our industry. And we'll talk a lot about what Sense does today and how automation is changing the paradigm for modern staffing companies.
Thank you. And last but not least, Andrew Lamorris, the President and CEO of Medix. Andrew, can you go ahead and unmute and introduce yourself? See if he can do that at this point. Paul, our WebEx producer, maybe you can give him a hand. Andrew, you with us?
Hello.
Hi, Andrew.
Hey, Adrienne. Good to be with everybody. Yes, Andrew Lamorris with Medix. We are a 20-plus-year-old staffing business that focuses on healthcare, life sciences, and IT. We pride ourselves on being a very purpose-led organization, and this has been a very fun summer for us in that capacity. So happy to be with you today.
I bet it's been a fun few years for y'all. Thanks, Andrew. It's really good to have you on the session. It's good to have you all on the session. With that, I think what I'd like to do now is turn it over to Pankaj. Pankaj.
Yeah, thank you, Adrienne. So, I wanted to start for our viewers and listeners by saying we're obviously talking about today on how automation is driving a changed paradigm. So it's critical to understand what's behind the changed paradigm. I talk about this a lot, but obviously the pandemic precipitated digital transformation for everybody. So if you think about it, wherever you were in your technical journey, you just had to get to that really quickly because suddenly you couldn't talk to your candidates or couldn't see them in person at least, couldn't see your customers, couldn't even see your all employees. So if you turn to the next slide, Adrienne, you'll see on how, This is the paradigm that we are living through today. One, it's a candidates market. I hope everybody agrees with that. We talk a lot about the consumerization of staffing now. Candidates expect the same behavior from a staffing company as they expect from an Amazon.com. When they go to your website, they want you to remember their preferences. If I ask you to text me, please text me, don't email me, and vice versa. If I ask you to reach out to me during office hours or after work hours, please remember that and don't do it the other way around. And you obviously need technology to do that if you're going to do that with hundreds of thousands, if not millions of candidates. Secondly, experience has a quantifiable value and impact. Everybody will tell you about, what their experience was interacting with you. This will actually weigh into whether they will, take a job or accept an offer with your company or not, so on and so forth. And lastly, automation is no longer an option. We talk to customers all the time where they're either experiencing a feast or a famine. Larry will probably talk about a feast. Some of the light industrial firms will probably talk about a famine. What I mean by a feast is you have a position open, you have hundreds of people applying to you. There is no way your recruiters can get to all of those people or find the needle haystack unless you use technology to figure out a way to pre-screen those candidates or get to the 10 best people out of the 1,000 who applied to you and get them in front of a recruiter and do this faster than each one of your competitors. Or you might be facing a famine, which a lot of our light industrial customers talked about. Hey, I have 500 positions open, and if I don't fill at least 400 of them, this particular plant or this manufacturing facility or this factory would just shut down. They won't be able to run if we don't fill all of those people. So in this case, instead of finding the needle in the haystack, you actually have to cast a much wider net. Originally, if you were reaching out to 100 people to find 10 folks that you can hire, now you reach out to 1,000. Again, can't just be done by your recruiter. So you absolutely have to turn to automation. Now, if all of this sounds familiar, you would think that, every staffing company would be on top of this. But as I'll show you in the next slide, the candidate experience is still pretty broken. So if you turn to the next slide, Adrian, you'll see 61% of the candidates will tell you that they never hear back from a company after they actually submitted a job application. They took the time to go to your website, found out, through all your web pages and cumbersome processes on how they can apply to you, and 60% of them are never hearing back from you. 58% of the candidates report an increase in, 58% of the companies report an increase in candidate withdrawal rate. These are people who will apply to you and withdraw their candidature because they either don't like the hiring experience or don't like the fact that nobody got back to them in time, so on and so forth. And then, of course, there are people who will simply decline offers because of their hiring experience. Candidates today absolutely have a choice, and they'd rather go there where they'll get a white glove experience. No-shows have increased by 20% in just the last year. So, you could make 100 offers, and originally, if you had 90 people show up to start, now you might only have 60 to 70 people who show up to start. So all in all, what I'm trying to say is candidate experience, hyper-personalization of that, giving them a consumer-like experience is essentially where the modern staffing companies and the best-run staffing companies are differentiating themselves from their peers. And Adrian, I know you have some statistics to talk about that actually further accentuates this point.
I think it does further accentuate this point, Pankaj. Wow. What we found out very recently in our staffing company survey, these are candidate flow statistics. So how candidates behave once, during the recruiting process. And when we looked at that, we found some very interesting points here. So how does it look? The stats vary by segment for commercial and professional staffing firms, right? Commercial stats indicate a very challenging staffing environment. I'm sure Neil can attest to that. Hold on one second here. I got a little thing here going on a chat. One second. A median 20% of those who accept an assignment not even show up, and 25% leave the assignment early, either fired or quitting. This compares with a median of 3% of temporaries on the professional side not showing up, and just 8% leaving the assignment early. Larry's smiling right now. Commercial staffing firms also face a tougher environment with regard to assignment extensions. A median 22% of commercial temps get an assignment extension versus 50% for the staffing side. And a median 20% of commercial temps convert to a permanent position versus 10% for professional, because they kind of like the money and that flexibility, I bet, would be my guess. But Larry can speak to that further. For Andrew and our friends in healthcare, of the candidates offered a job, a median 20% turn it down, and of those that accept the offer, 5% never show up, 3% get fired by the client due to poor performance, and another 4% quit the assignment early, just voluntarily. A whopping 50% either have the assignment extended by the client or get offered another assignment by the same client. Just 5% convert to permanent versus 20% in commercial and 10% in professional. As you might imagine, the redeployment stats for healthcare are high, with a median 60% successfully placed by their staffing firm in another assignment. So looking at all this, maybe we need to take a look at the recruiting process next. What do you think, Pankaj?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the one thing I was going to say was, you would think that obviously every single staffing company would know this, would hear this from their peers, and would immediately be able to make changes. But here is the reason why they don't, right? So if you go to the next slide, you're going to see this is what a typical recruiting
It's pretty
process.
impressive, Pankaj. Whoa!
Yeah, so this is what the typical recruiting process for a staffing company looks like today, right? I mean, there are so many stages. By the way, this is an actual recruiting process from one of our customers, and we have customers who actually use more stages than this. I certainly don't want to use the word opportunity, but there is an opportunity for a candidate to drop out at any one of these stages. Any of these stages is taking too long. Any of these stages is feeling like this is a cumbersome process. So how does automation help? In the next slide, you'll see that using automation, just think of it as like chutes and ladders. You can actually reduce this 26 step process into what I've shown here are 10 or 11 steps. So Adrian, if you'll step to the next slide, this is what can happen by just using a few pieces of automation. Can you automatically screen and schedule? Can you automatically do cadence-based workflows? Can you track referrals automatically? We have customers today, and some of them are on the panel with us, who are actually challenging us to reduce this to 1 or 2 or 3 steps. Essentially, in the professional world, can you go within 5 minutes from somebody saying hello to, hey, you're scheduled to talk to a recruiter? And oftentimes in the light industrial and commercial world, can you go within 5 minutes from hello to hire? You literally just came to our website, said hello for the first time. 5 minutes later, we're essentially saying you have a job. We've asked you a few questions. We figured out that you are willing to work for the amount of money we're willing to pay. You'll subject yourself to a COVID screening. You haven't been in a felony. You can stand on your feet. You can lift 50 pounds a day. Boom. As long as you can provide us some identification, you have the job. And that's what I mean by consumerization of staffing. Now, I know, Adrian and the team over at SI conduct a lot of research reports. And, the one that she shared with us while we were prepping for this, and I'll let her talk to this, was very interesting on how do you retain temps and how do you lose them?
Yeah. So this report, I thought it was really interesting. And this is another recent report, July of this year. And it talked about one of the predictors in losing workers is poor communication. And I think that comes back to the priority of providing the candidate with the information they want at scale. Communication is a huge predictor in losing workers. So you've got to give candidates the information they want ongoing. And this is what they said when we asked them why they left. The lack of communication is appalling. They never respond to text, emails, voicemails. Poor communication. Recruiters are rude and rush you off the phone when there is a problem. I don't think this applies to any of our parents. But this is what some of them said in response to the survey. So, Pankaj, back to you.
Yeah, so, let's actually get to the meat of our webinar, which is listening from our experts. I am absolutely delighted to have our panelists join us today. These are obviously companies who have figured out automation, who have really mastered how do you provide a better candidate experience. And, we're basically leveraging on them today to share some of their experience. Today, as you probably have noticed, the guests that we have are essentially the leaders from IT, healthcare, and light industrial verticals. So whatever staffing company you hail from, as our listener today, hopefully there are nuggets here that you can take back from one or all of these leaders. And we've talked about some use cases that are probably more tailored to your specific staffing company. So uh, in the case of IT firms, for example, there is referral automation, there is redeployment, there is, how do you worry about attrition? How do you worry about NPS? How do you worry about trickle and drip campaigns? So I want to get Larry's thoughts on this. Larry, thank you so much for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and Insight Global before we get started?
Yeah, of course. So a little bit about Insight Global. We're one of the largest staffing companies in the country. We also have a large footprint within managed services. And for us, while our largest book of business is in IT staffing, we also do a lot of work within healthcare, accounting and finance, engineering, business, and a large number of other industry verticals. And what we see is that while IT has some specific things that are a little bit niche to it, there's maybe a little bit more remote work in IT, and there's a little bit more of high skill worker demand for niche skill sets that come up kind of out of nowhere. It's all pretty much the same. Recruiting is a very simple game, and it all comes down to how well can you get a lot of candidates at the top of the funnel, make them matched to jobs within your ecosystem, and then from there, help make sure that you're managing just a wonderful consultant and candidate experience all the way through. And so when we take a look at automation, I like to think of it as a really key part of our digital transformation in 3 different areas. It comes down to candidate sourcing, candidate matching, and then candidate experience. So let's start with the candidate sourcing element of it. We all have had times where we've either been leveraging things like our own internal job board partners like your Indeed, LinkedIn, ZipRecruiter, Dice, name your job board. Programmatic advertising is an exciting new development in the technology space here. But we all have recruiters that every single day are manually uploading jobs, putting them up, bringing them down. And unfortunately, when you have your candidates spending, or your recruiters spending a lot of times with those manual processes, it's a lot of wasted effort. And not only is it wasted effort, but it leads to a lot of human error in regards to candidates applying to jobs that we actually no longer need candidates for, or jobs that we need up on our website and therefore replicated up on LinkedIn or via programmatic advertising, not being up and replicated because we're still waiting on the recruiter to be able to do it. So when we think about our inbound recruiting strategy, candidate sourcing as a whole, this is where we've had to inject a lot of automation over the last 3 to 4 years. We've had to build out pipelines with our custom ATS into things like Indeed, ZipRecruiter, LinkedIn. We added a programmatic advertising layer as well to be able to get everyone moving towards the right jobs at the right time so that we're spending the right amount of advertising dollars. And then from there, automation plays a critical role in recycling great candidates so that you're having your great candidates being able to apply to 3 to 4 different jobs. There's really key elements of the candidate sourcing process, which isn't just having them apply to one job, but having them to apply to 3 to 4. Candidates like applying in spurts. Most of us, if we've ever had to search for a job, remember, we're sitting there on our phone and we're going through 3 or 4 different things during an episode of SportsCenter or The Bachelor or whatever you might be watching at the time. And so candidates apply in spurts. So you want them applying to yours. At least at Insight Global, I prefer them applying to 4 Insight Global jobs and not a job with Insight Global, Kforce, ASGN, and then Tech Systems. Now, moving towards the top of the funnel as the candidates get into the ecosystem, you've built all this automation to make sure that you're getting the right candidates applying to the right jobs at the right time, and then recirculating them through so that they're able to apply to 3 to 4 jobs with you, helping you highlight, you make the match, and one of your recruiters calls that person. Okay, so they're sourced, right? You have the candidate in your pipeline now. The next step is how do you use automation to be able to get the candidate matched? Now, in old school staffing, what you would see is you'd see manual processes like a big dry erase board. And by like old school for Insight Global, it's like 2017, 2018. We still have the dry erase boards back then. And you would say, hey, like I've got my rec and it's written in this email. I give it to my recruiter. That's awesome. And they're on the search. Well, now, especially with the rise of remote work for a lot of your big staffing agencies, the strategy is how do I lean into the 40,000 candidates I spoke with last week or the 100,000 people that have applied online in the last month. I actually have to less and less go out and search for a new candidate because I'm probably already sitting on somebody in my pipeline And so for us, that's where you have to use a lot of automation in the form of alerts and triggers and long-term machine learning and artificial intelligence, where you can make those recommendations. Which of your 10,000 jobs needs candidates, and which of your 40,000 candidates are good for those 10,000 jobs? You need technology and automation driving that experience through. All right, so last, the third place, right? Okay, so we source the candidate via automation. You have a heavy recruiter experience, and it's a very high-touch recruiter experience, but there's a lot of technology enablement in the automation of making the match, and they're hired. This is awesome. So where do you have automation now? And this is where, for Insight Global, we've wanted to put a real heavy investment in our process and organization that we call consultant engagement. Consultant engagement is a full organization within my org that sits separate from everything else and solely focuses on the actual consultant experience. They go through the entire workflow. This is where partners like Sense are key, right? We've got to be able to have our Sense workflows by customer outlined so that you have the right onboarding packet with the right benefits and the right message. Insight Global Family Foundation provides grants to our consultants that fall on hard times. We need to be able to have automation built into our workflow so that they know about that, so that if they come into one of life's storms, they can find that out. I can't rely on the recruiter in the office to remember to make the call at month 6, let them know they're eligible for an IGFF grant if something were to come up. I need the automation to let them know there. This is where we're also using automation to be able to drive down really, really business harmful events like negative attrition or negative turnover. We consider negative turnover that happens within the first 30 days of assignment. For the majority of our positions, you'll see those assignments will go on 6+ months. And so if you're losing people in the first 30 days, that's incredibly harmful to your business. So for us, that's where we're using things like Sense text message pulses that are able to get you, an NPS or an approval rating on how your first 30 days have been. And if you need anything, just reply right here. And then automation on the back end that actually routes that into ServiceNow, where our consultant experience center can actually have the chance to reach in and immediately mitigate those issues. The only thing worse than not having a place for people to give you feedback is having a place for people to give you feedback and then you not actually implementing it and trying to remediate those situations. And so, hey, they're on site. We have our consultant experience framework, heavy human touch, heavy automation. Sense plays a big role in that right here. But what we've really seen is we've seen it help drive down our negative turnover. Near the end of assignment, we've seen it be able to boost our redeployment rates substantially by being able to get ahead of those end dates earlier on in the process. And because of all of that, we were able to achieve our best ever company NPS by our consultants last year at 55. And this year, based off of our Sense NPS surveys, which has surveyed over 10,000 different consultants, we're in the 60s. So I think it's this combination of automation and human effort, automation and human care that is built into your sourcing, matching, and then consultant management platforms, which is now practically table stakes to be able to be a big staffing player in any of these industries.
That's amazing, Larry. I must say, like, some of the use cases that you have are pretty unique in the industry. So thank you so much for sharing that, specifically what you do with the Insight Global Foundation. I'm a big fan of that. Can you maybe also talk a little bit about, what's the macro, micro sort of ROI that you see out of it, and how do you guys think about ROI from automation?
Yeah, this is great. So when we think about ROI from automation in each of those different levels, we see that there is a much more efficient candidate that comes through from inbound recruiting. And so when our candidates are applying to us, it takes less conversations with the recruiter. Your placement rate is technically higher. So when you submit them to customers, it takes less submittals to be able to get those people hired, and they back out less because you're not banging on their door. They actually came to you first. And so we'll see anywhere from 200 to 300 basis points in any of those different areas. We'll see massive ROI in being able to drive down our negative turnover. Turnover in the first 30 days, that's very easy to be able to math out. If you can drive that down from 10% negative turnover in the first 30 days to 7%, well, you just take those 3% of your candidates, that is that delta, and the revenue that they generate throughout the life cycle of that next contract, and that's revenue saved from those business processes. And then last, kind of the golden goose of these types of programs for big staffing players is redeploy. You see it in IT, you see it in light industrial, you see it in healthcare. Being able to boost your redeploy rates can help double, triple, quadruple the revenue generated from the consultant, but more importantly, the consultant experience of knowing that they're able to go from consecutive contracts with you as their staffing supplier. People don't want to have to work with 3 or 4 different staffing agencies. They want to be able to work with one. And so if you can leverage automation to be able to get that first redeploy, we see that at times you can create customers for life. And each one of those redeployed candidates is effectively return on investment, net new revenue generated from not having that consultant term.
I couldn't agree more. I talk about this so much, Larry. The fact that even if you can get somebody one consecutive assignment, just another one, first of all, you completely lose any cost per hire. In IT firms like cost per hires can be $1,500 to $3,000. That's money that you're not spending if you get somebody a second job. And obviously, you can pass some of that money back to them and some of them back to your bottom line. It's just a win-win for everybody. And listen, before I let you go, somebody sent this really nice question, so I'm going to throw a curveball at you here.
I saw that, Pankaj. I wondered. It's a good one.
Yeah, I love these. I love the live fire questions, by the way. I don't like to wait till the end stuff. I know we'll do it. That's good too. But
well, here we go. Here we go.
Then. So,
what's our question?
It says, what's the future of automation in the recruiting sector and how will it impact our jobs as recruiters? Do the benefits outweigh the possibility of fully automating the recruitment function?
Yeah. Okay. So here's the analogy that I like to use as it pertains to automation, as far as like the recruiter function. As a recruiting executive, all I want my people doing is being able to spend time on the phone with candidates, matching them to jobs, and helping to manage the consultant experience. There's such a human element to that. And you only make a career change on average 5 to 7 times as a human in your career. Now, if you're a career contractor, that might be a little bit more, but that is a major career change. You're not trusting that with a bot. You need a human on the other end of the line with a company whose values align with you, and you need that person to be able to help handhold you through a big decision, which is your next career, which is your next paycheck, which is your next mortgage payment, or your next food on your family for your food on the table for your family. So you're always going to need that extra person that's in that big life experience. It's similar to real estate. Anybody ever pull up Zillow and be like, yeah, man, I know every house and I know like what it costs and I know like what the Zestimate is and all that other good stuff. Anybody ever go knock on the door of that person in real estate and say, hey, Zillow pointed me here via automation. Can we start getting into negotiations? I'd love to do the open house. No, we still have real estate brokers. We still have mortgage brokers and all of the like. But for me in particular, as it pertains to our recruiters, there's so much stuff that gets in the way of your recruiter's time. For me in particular, I've noticed this relationship that the more successful my recruiters are, the more non-recruiting activities fall on their plate. These are things like timesheets, paperwork, email check-ins and follow-up, random calls via random issues with different consultants that they do need to be able to help mitigate. But the more that I can use automation to be able to take those non-business critical functions out from their job, the more time they actually have to do for the job that I hired them for. And so for me, I want to use technology or automation and artificial intelligence to be able to give our recruiters lift and to be able to improve the candidate experience so that I can do more with more recruiters. And I don't ever see it erasing the industry. Yeah, that's the answer to that one.
Thank you. Thank you, Larry. Great answer. Thank you so much. Stick around. I'm sure we'll have more questions for you, but let me go ahead and welcome Andrew. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us. Would you mind taking a minute and filling us a little bit more about yourself and about Medix? I know you gave us a small intro, but it'll be good to hear a little bit more from you.
Yeah, no, I'm really happy to introduce Medix a little bit more. First and foremost, I think I'm really proud of the fact that, Medix started out of an 8x10 office, and here we are 21 years later, 800 plus teammates, and what we're really, really proud of is that the whole journey has been pretty organic, and it has been really fun. I know Insight Global has a similar story also. The thing that we hang our hat on as an organization is, especially through COVID, we saw this, is that, first and foremost, when you're scaling, you got to take care of your own. And so I think we've done an incredible job over the last 20 plus years of taking care of our people, producing, and then being super thoughtful around again, same theme as Insight Global, is that going out in community and taking care of, our communities and doing right by people. So, Medix is super proud of kind of what we've built as far as a purpose-led organization. And we hang our hat on healthcare, life sciences, and IT. Those are the three verticals where we play. We started in healthcare, and then life sciences and IT came along a little bit later. But it's been a really fun journey. And technology has changed throughout the journey. When we started, it was, alamorris@hotmail.com. So we've come a long way.
And I was going to say, Andrew, I've probably known you as long as it was, well, maybe not as long as it was alamorris@hotmail.com, but I remember sitting in your Chicago office over 5 years ago when we got started with Sense. So, I almost think of you as a visionary because you were thinking about automation, a long, long time ago. But before we go there, can you maybe talk to us about some of the challenges you were facing and what even drove you to start thinking about automation?
Well, I think probably the key to a leader in my seat today in getting the right information. We're reading this book called How Only the Paranoid Survive by Andy Grove. And I think it's really important. I think it's really important for leaders of organizations to not pretend that they know everything, and they're able to get out in the fringes of their own organization, not only to understand what the customers are thinking, but as we onboard so much new talent that are, I want to think that are a little bit more technology savvy in some capacity, what are the ideas? What are the thoughts? And we've always operated as an entrepreneurial organization. We have this big saying inside the company: we're not interested in being right, we're interested in the right answer. So break stuff. If something doesn't work, or you figure out a different process, it's not our way or the highway. If somebody has a different process or a different way to do something, that we'll listen. And because of that attitude, you're right, Pankaj, a long time ago we've leaned into this idea that technology really, I said 8 years ago, we're a talent technology company, and everybody said, what does that mean? And the conversation was, we want our customers to be able to submit a requirement, and through AI and through matching, they automatically get 3 or 4 candidates right back to them. And then they click on the 1 or 2 that they like, and then we'll go ahead, back to the question from before, is a recruiter going to be needed long-term if technology continues? Absolutely, because I think that, the vision down the line for all of us would be to reduce the number of candidates that a customer would look at, give them more visibility, and then we go to work on making sure that they have the right aptitude, competencies, behaviors, disciplines, desires to match that particular organization, not to mention soft skills. So, yeah, absolutely. As far as us adopting technology early, we definitely did do that.
Yeah. So, and Andrew, I know it's been a journey. I mean, you guys adopted this technology. You started to do a little few things with it. Then you did more. Then you did more. And then you do a lot of it now. Maybe share with our viewers, if you wouldn't mind, how is automation helping today? I mean, what parts of your business that the recruiters are spending a bunch of time on are just gone? What parts are you getting some ROI out of? How is it helping your hiring goals? How do you use Sense? I mean, all of that would be super helpful.
Yeah, I mean, from a Sense perspective, we've been, super excited that, we understand, we talked about in 2005 and 2006, I remember going to SIA and they talked about poor communication. That's why, that's one of the things that, that our talent really gets upset about. And I think that for us as an organization, we understand that communication is super important. Just this idea of understanding speed to candidates, speed to customer is important, but engagement and a high level of engagement and following through is really key. And I'll tell you where we fell short this past couple years. I mean, we've had 4 years of tremendous growth, 19, 20, 21, and now in 22. And really last year where we fell short is we were so busy, we did not win Best in Staffing talent. And it really hurt. I mean, we just fell short, but you can't use the excuse we were so busy, that's why we didn't win. Where we fell short was our automation and our technology wasn't at scale. We didn't ramp up enough. Unlike it sounds like Insight had the best engagement they've ever had. For us, we had great internal engagement, great customer engagement, but we fell a little bit short with our talent. And we've leaned into that with a lot of the tools that Sense offers, and we've seen that hockey stick move in the opposite direction. So we're incredibly excited and bullish about not only automation, but the tools that you all have afforded us the ability to use to engage our talent pool.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I was actually going to add one of the things we're very excited about is you guys use sort of, what we call database automation really, really well. So just keeping your data clean, anything, if, there is a field that changes, if somebody says I was going to be available in 3 months, but I'm available now, or if I'm moving my location from Cleveland to Chicago, you guys do a really good job at using those alerts and saying, hey, this should trigger an automation because somebody's moving. We should tell them we have a position open for you in Chicago, so on and so forth. So that's actually an example we talk about a lot within our company.
Yeah, and our team has been super thoughtful around just this idea of clean data. I mean, they talk about it all the time, making sure that we're not putting our recruiters in a position where they don't have the right information to run really fast.
Got it. Awesome. Andrew, thank you so much. I'm going to come back to you with some questions because, one of the things I wanted to add was something we see very specifically in healthcare, and even more specifically over the last couple of years is, healthcare workers don't really work 9 to 5. Oftentimes healthcare workers are getting a break at midnight, getting a break at odd hours, and not every single time you're going to be able to talk to a recruiter. So one of the things we've seen a lot is how healthcare firms, will use a chatbot. You can talk to a chatbot at midnight. You can go through your pre-screening. You can find out, hey, if I have the right credentials, if I'll travel to a certain spot, if I'm willing to work for a certain amount of money, so on and so forth. And then you, as the talent, as the candidate, as the healthcare professional, can choose the actual time you want to engage with the staffing firm. Hey, medics, thank you for taking me through this pre-screening. I'll love to talk to your recruiter on Thursday at 3 p.m. because I know that's when I can take a 15-minute break. And when you do that, candidates show up. There is a lot of research. If you simply Google it, you'll find it that on an average, it takes 6 to 7 emails to schedule a meeting. So you can skip all of that because you pick a time that you will show up at and essentially continue the recruiting process. And this is a use case that we saw play out a lot during the pandemic, but more specifically in the healthcare space. Andrew, thank you so much. Thanks for sharing your thoughts. I'll move on to, our light industrial world, probably one of my favorite segments. And the reason I call this my favorite is because results and impact in light industrial is almost immediately visible. I cannot tell you, and hopefully Neil will share with you a little bit here, but I cannot tell you how many stories we have about customers telling us, hey, we had a customer come to us on a Friday and say, we need 50 people in our factory by Monday. And they're not going to have anybody do recruiting over the weekend, but they just send out a text message blast or a chatbot blast to 1,000 candidates. This is outbound from their database. 50 of them reply with their pre-screened questions, and they literally all pick up the 8 a.m. time on Monday to say, I'll show you my 2 IDs, and as long as you can verify my I-9, I'm off to work. So with that preamble, Neil, welcome so much. Can you take a minute, as Larry and Andrew did, to tell us a little bit more about yourself and the Reserves Network, where all you guys operate, how big you are?
Of course. Pankaj, thank you guys for having me. I mean, I'm kind of humbled to be on this panel, but it's so we are the Reserves Network is a brand, primarily works with mid-market manufacturing companies. It's kind of our niche. For those of us in the staffing industry, that means light industrial. So we do a lot of blue collar placements, but we like to be able to, we have specialty recruiters that can, fill direct placements and engineers and, more professional clerical positions as well. So we also have grown organically into different geographic markets outside of Cleveland and the state of Ohio. We've also grown via acquisition. So we're currently running 6 brands. Some of those brands still have some of the legacy business that that those companies were built on. So we're still trying to figure out how to integrate some of those and how to get the synergies between the 2 different companies going. But currently we're running 45 different markets in 12 states. Again, primarily 40 of those are primarily light industrial type markets. Others get into more of the professional clerical placements. We do have a medical division as well. That's one of our challenges, is trying to adopt the technology across our different verticals and the different services that we provide.
Awesome. And I have the same question for you. Tell me a little bit about, your world is obviously very different. What are some of your pain points? Where did you start thinking, how did you start thinking about automation? I know you and I were in touch for a number of years before we got started with you, but, give us your journey on when it became important to you and what were you looking to solve?
Oh, absolutely. Automation's, we've already touched on it or alluded to it a couple times. I mean, there is a genuine war for talent. It's been raging for a couple of years. I don't see it getting better anytime soon. So over the last couple of years, especially, I could really sense, just a frustration and a burnout, and our recruiters are working so hard and they love what they do, and they come to work because we love staffing and we want to change lives and we want to work with employers of choice and fill mission critical positions. But it's so hard, to find good people and then to get good people to stick, and just the turnover and the churn and the no-shows and so it was really affecting. I think a lot of morale issues that were kind of bubbling up. So that was one of the drivers. Understand that we are light industrial, and I guess that may. We're kind of old fashioned. I bet the company's been around for 38 years. My dad started it. We're currently, my brother, my sister, my wife, myself, and, a fantastic executive team and, a couple hundred, amazing recruiters and salespeople. But, it's changed a lot. And, that one flow chart that you put up there with, 26 different steps in the interview process or the hiring process, that's absolutely true. I can remember back in the day, I know I sound like an old like an old fart, but, back in the day, we used to work off of, index cards and Rolodexes and backs of resumes, and we just used to staff, and we used to love it. And now it's a lot of compliance and a lot of paperwork and a lot of touch points and a lot of our customer contract is 7 pages now. That used to fit on the back of a time card. It's nuts how. When you stop and think about it, how the industry has evolved, how the competition has evolved, how the customers have evolved, and for us to be able to keep up with the production and the amount of business and gross profits that we need to generate, we need automation to do that. So we've recognized that. We've also recognized that there is competitive pressure out there, that there are companies that have entered the space that are virtual, that are almost entirely without bricks and mortar. So we have to be able to compete with that. But our customers are old-fashioned too. So it takes a lot of effort to get our customers to adopt the technology, for us to adopt the technology internally, for us to get our candidates to adopt the technology. So, Specific with Sense though, I think what's beautiful about the automation is that it's a behind the scenes type of thing. So that it doesn't have quite the change management impact that some of these other pieces of technology do, where you have to get people to adopt it. We set these journeys, we build this automation, we program it, and then just kind of let the technology do its thing, right? So so we're relatively new in this. We've been going pretty hardcore since April of this year. There was a lot of planning and kind of set up for that, but I've got an amazing team who's plugging away at launching new journeys on a regular basis. But we really started with from a sales perspective. We kind of looked at it from, okay, our job, even with this war for talent, right? So every company needs people. We need to be working with employers of choice, and we need to have our sales engines running, at peak efficiency all the time. And so we've been able to adopt our prospecting process, a 10-week, 12-touch process, and launch that 40 prospects a week, every single week, working through this process with 2 coordinators in 15 different markets. And, we just couldn't possibly do that without the automation. So that was one big point for us. And that's really what kind of launched us into this automation thing. And then you kind of roll it into, okay, now it's all about the candidate touches. And that's where the numbers really kind of blow up, because, we started off with launching, or reactivating our database. One of the big challenges right now is recruiting. Excuse me. We of course we work with job boards, and we advertise and recruit and go for bringing in new candidates all the time. But we're sitting on a database, 38-year-old database with thousands and thousands and thousands of people. So why not wake them up? Why not reactivate them? And that was one of the things that Sense kind of brought to the table, that, okay, here's low-hanging fruit. And so we launched a campaign and immediately touched within minutes, over 100,000 candidates. And, however they were engaged, and maybe we reactivated, 10% of those, but those were calls that our recruiters didn't have to make. The Sense automation just did that, and the call savings, the time savings is immeasurable as far as I'm concerned. And then as it's evolved just over the last couple months, we're taking care of our engagement and keeping people on assignment. If we're going to go through all the work to recruit and place and hire and place people, we want to keep them on assignment. We want to redeploy them as well. So we've got steps built into this process now where it truly has automated that the arrival calls, and the first day calls, and the second day calls, and the weekly calls, and just the checkups to re-engage and touch points. And these are things that we've lost over the years, to really maintain that human aspect of it, while keeping the automation. It's kind of it's a really cool hybrid, because it's automated, but still it's that personal touch. And I don't know that we could get that elsewhere, but we've thousands of first day calls and second day calls, and just the time savings. You assume those calls take 5 minutes each, just thousands and thousands of minutes and of possibly non-revenue producing work that is saved, right? So I think in all, just the way that the technology has, the automation has affected us. I think we've calculated over 1.2 million touch points in a handful of months, between customers, prospects, and candidates, employees. It's kind of mind-boggling.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you so much for sharing some of those specifics. This is exactly the kind of things that, I thrive on. For instance, you talked about 10-week, 12 touch point process. With most of our customers, we actually help them build these cadences that look like drip campaigns or trickle campaigns that Larry talked about before. The whole idea is, those are best practices in engagement, right? You're telling everybody, you're on my mind. I'm going to keep reaching out to you every couple of days. And the moment you engage with me, I'm going to take you on a completely different journey so you feel like you have a hyper-personalized experience. And, somebody from our audience posted this that I just absolutely love. That's Demont Daniel from Pride Staff. And he said Pride Staff use Sense and Riva, which is our chatbot, to hire 800 ambassadors for the 2022 NHL All-Star Weekend. And this is exactly the kind of thing that I'm talking about, because oftentimes people will go, hey, I need like 1,000 people for a Beyonce concert, but they'll only have a 2-day job or a 3-day job. And how do you actually hire those people? There's a question from Bob on, do you work in the gig staffing space? And that's, a great example of where gig staffing space comes into play. But thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. So Adrian, if you wouldn't mind, I was just summarizing it to say, candidate satisfaction. I mean, if you've heard our experts talk about this today, these are the largest staffing companies in the US, right? So, I mean, these guys obviously are leading how we interact with our candidates. It is important because it has a meaningful bottom line impact. You absolutely retain your people. You get a higher NPS score. You get a higher Glassdoor rating. You decrease your cost per hire. You get more gross margin. It is all contributing to your bottom line. You're getting more referrals. And the only way you can do that is through engagement and communication. That's what delivers a hyper-personalized experience. Now, you almost have to think of this as sort of an end-to-end process, or cradle to grave, or 360, or whatever term you might like to use here. But the idea is the moment somebody says hello to you, from that point forward, they just always have to stay within your ecosystem, whether it is through the recruiting process, through the onboarding process, through while they're working for you and you giving them a white glove experience, redeploying them. And if you don't redeploy them and somebody actually leaves you, you're going to reactivate them back into your company either 3 months later or 3 years later. But that's the whole idea of nurturing these folks forever. So in the next slide, I'm simply showing you all the Sense products that come together to do this. This is what all of our speakers today have been talking about. What you see on the top is essentially a 360-degree process, right from sourcing and attracting to redeploying, and then back again to sourcing once you start redeploying people, and the various products that let you engage in sort of a deeply personalized fashion. Thank you, Adrian. Do you want me to take a couple of questions from the audience? Do we have a few minutes to do that?
Sure, absolutely. This was a great panel. I enjoyed listening to everyone's different viewpoints. I thought that, Andrew talked about early adoption being key and clean data, and Neil talked about, being an employer of choice, his 10 to 12 step process, 100,000 candidates for each is a pretty big number.
That's right.
And then Larry talked about, the NPS of 70, which is quite high, 1.4 million touch points, and seeking negative attrition. But one of the questions that we have from our audience is, what consultant touch points have you found to be the most valuable? And I think that's for you or anyone else.
Yeah, I can jump in on that. I answered it in the chat, but for us, it's all about driving down that negative attrition in the first 30 days. And so being able to catch your consultants that are having issues at the 1-week check-in and at the 30-day NPS check-in, those are also great ways to be able to engage referral automation. If you have brand ambassadors who are promoting your brand, that's a great place to be able to ask them for referrals. And then the NPS review at the end of assignment is really powerful for us. I think that if you can culturally get your recruiters and your leaders to understand NPS and to put it up as a competitive scoreboard, if you've got the right culture of taking care of your people, then they'll actually turn that into a competitive nature around how well they take care of their consultants. So I love seeing our Austin office and our Baltimore office compete against each other to see which consultant engagement leader can have the highest office NPS in a given quarter. And for us to be able to have the levers to be able to align things like compensation or added benefits in relation to those things. When you can get that competitive nature amongst your teams around things like an experience score, you really activate all 1,500 recruiters.
Yeah, Larry, you said something really cool that I wanted to double down on. One of the things that automation will do for you, it'll actually give you granular analytics. We didn't talk about that much, but Larry just brought this up. The idea that you can slice and dice your company horizontally or vertically. Hey, is client A doing better than client B and why? Or is recruiter A doing better than recruiter B? Or in his example, is the Baltimore office doing better than the Chicago office and why?
Yeah, and then some of the ways that are so powerful with that too is if you're using large amounts of macro data, tens of thousands of written surveys, when you can combine tools like Sense and those surveys with like sentiment analysis tools to be able to use natural language processing to be able to really get to the crux of the issues in a lot of these areas, that allows you as an executive to make some really important big business decisions around where to invest in certain programs. You might hear from a few loud voices that the issue might be A, but the issue that's actually driving the majority of your detractors is B. And using this macro data, you're able to analyze that and be able to make those smart decisions.
Thanks, Larry. Hey, so I think this is a really good question. There's many places in the recruitment process where automation can add value. In your opinion, where in the process would a firm see the most value through automation? Andrew, Neil, any thoughts on that? One place.
I would say probably the one, the one place for someone that is not using a lot of automation would be messaging. Text messaging has been a great tool for us at certain levels. It has been a great tool. We've spent time with the kind of white glove mentality. That's been great. But I want to comment on something that real quick that Neil said. At times there is manual processes that when you're having difficulty and when you're going into automation, that you can look at those manual processes that worked for you back in the day, and then you can go to a person like Pankaj and talk to him about, hey, this is what worked, or this is what we're doing now. We want to automate this process, but we want it to behave like this. He's a great resource to have that type of mentality. But if I had an agency and I was going to get started and I wanted to impact the requirements I had on the board and put people to work, I would say text messaging, automating text messaging.
Neil, any thoughts?
The text messaging is certainly a big part of our usage of Sense as well. The chatbot automates a lot of things. At least it gives that immediate response. So that kind of makes that a no-brainer. But I do. I think the biggest impact is just that ongoing employee engagement, especially when they're on assignment or potentially redeploying somebody. We work so hard to recruit, candidates and employees that, it's a shame when you just, don't have time to call somebody and they just disappear. And then, so if we can have the system, programmed to, touch them at the right times, then we have a better chance, certainly of staying engaged and not losing that investment that we've already put into it. So,
like that slide I showed, poor communication, turn that upside down into great communication.
Yeah.
All right. I think we're out of time, my friends. Thank you, Pankaj, Larry, Andrew, Neil. This has been a great session. Thank you for your sponsorship and, of course, your thought leadership to Sense. If you are looking for SIA resources, these are the resources we used on this webinar and a few more for you. Some of those you have to be a member and some of those are free. And with that, I want to thank our audience. We had a lot of folks on here today. I want to thank you for staying tuned and stay tuned for our next webinar coming up. Thank you and have a great rest of your day.
And I'll thank everybody as well. It was, your time is very valuable. So Larry, Andrew, Neil, thank you for giving us the time. Adrian, thank you for working with us as always. It's a pleasure. And thank you everybody for joining.
All right. Have a great rest of your day.
Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.